Welcome to the Madison Park Podcast. We're so glad you're here. Join us each week as we recap messages and take a deeper look at what God is doing in the community. For more information, find us on socials or visit madisonpark.church.
All right, welcome everybody to the Mad Park Pod. This is episode 5 of season 1, which sounds so official, doesn't it?
It does.
Just thinking, I'm glad that you can keep the numbers straight.
I have a document of guests and topics.
Yeah, but you don't have it in front of you. So.
Well, I just looked at it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so welcome. We've got some special guests here. To my left, if you're watching us on video, to your right, I have Asher. He is our intern. He's super talented, very kind, very good looking.
Buttering me up.
That's right. Everybody, welcome Asher. Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I'm currently a senior at Anderson University, and I am having an absolute blast getting to work here with these guys. They're amazing people.
Perfect. I love that. We love you too. Mm-hmm. He came to our all staff yesterday, and he was the showstopper.
I almost won, but
you did.
You guys took the lead at the end.
Yep.
You win in a staff meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are winners and losers. Yeah.
That sounds really bad.
It does sound bad.
Yeah.
And then off to my right, if you're watching this in video again, your left, we have the wonderful Than.
Hello.
Than, which is short for Nathaniel.
Yes, sir.
So I get that a lot where people ask me what it's short for, and I like to make things up.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. Anyway, do you want to say anything before we jump into this?
Yeah, I'm a junior at Anderson University. Good friends with the team here. Happy to be on.
Yep, we're super, super happy you guys are on. So we're in the middle of a series called No Offense. And if you haven't checked out any of those messages, you should do it. They're on our YouTube page. So if you're watching this, you probably just need to click the back button and or maybe just look down a little bit and you'll see the messages by week. So this was the 3rd week of No Offense. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But even before we get into that, let's do like, how was your week? Are you guys doing okay? Are things good in the hood?
Not everything.
Yeah, somebody go.
It's been a challenging week, very emotional one for me. Just some stuff happened in my family, but we're here and we're gonna make it a great time.
Yep. That's good. I'm sorry to hear that. Your hair looks great today. I will say that.
Thanks.
So you have that to feel good about.
Thank you.
Yeah, my week's been a lot of up and down and a lot of like super like whiplash of super tense high stress situations, and then everything is just perfectly fine after those situations, and it was
Perfect.
like, oh, we knew you were going to pull through, God, all the way. And then like the next day the same thing happened, you know.
Yep.
So it's been a lot of up and down. I think we're on an up right now. So
I like it.
Yeah, it's been a good week, I think. Challenges, all the things. I don't know if I'm sure people have weeks that are like 100. This week isn't 100, but it's not terrible. So it's been a pretty good week.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I'm not a winter person, so I have moments of like where I love the fall. It's like, this is so great, but it's sort of like the precursor.
The calm before the storm.
Yeah. I have like bird bones, so I just get really cold. Yeah,
I just thought you were
do.
I just thought you were just making a statement about how you have bird bones. I was like, segue right there.
Yeah, nailed it. Yeah. No, I just mean like I get basically. I mean, how cold is it out today?
It was like 50s this morning.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
it was
like-
cold this morning. It's probably 60-something now.
I generally wear long sleeves all year.
Well,
So
I do
that-
too, because we work inside and it's always cold in our office
That's fair.
all the time.
Yeah, it's just the world can be cold.
That's true.
It's a real thing.
It kind of dawned on me this morning because I always I don't dry my hair because I have curly hair. So you just have to let it dry naturally unless you're like fancy and have all the like millions of dollars worth of hair products. I don't have those. So I just let it air dry, and it kind of occurred to me that it's that season where my hair freezes again, and that is like the worst thing ever, because you walk outside and your hair just turns to rocks. And then,
It's perfect.
yeah,
I wish I had that problem. Like, genuinely.
it's not ideal.
That's fair. So I'll try to get us back on topic. So we're in a series called No Offense, and to sort of like kind of recap it, we're just looking at the reality that in life you're going to offend people, you're going to be offended, and we're going to dive in a little bit today to the reality that like the gospel is offensive. But I think one of the big things, like as a series, the idea is like just to open your eyes or zoom out on the reality that we all live in this place of we do get offended, and we do offend other people. And I think just living with that idea gives you some freedom to like look at a situation differently, to know like, am I just taking this overly offensive? Overly offensively? Am I being overly offensive for no reason? Like, I think it raises questions. So I'm curious. I know we all kind of listened to the message this week, which we normally do. That sounded like we don't normally do that. But I think in listening to the message, I was kind of listening to it again on the way here. And the first thing that stands out from it is like the idea or the reality that the gospel is offensive. And I'm curious to know, do you guys find that to be true in your like day-to-day lives? And how do you see that like kind of played out? I think she shared the story about being on an airplane. Do you guys remember that one?
Yeah.
Where it's like, as soon as you say you're a pastor, all of a sudden everyone like sits up straight.
Straightens up, yeah.
And it's like, oh, darn. You know, like the language gets all better. And anyway, sorry. What were you going to say?
I would say that like it definitely can cause people to like put on a different persona around you. I grew up as a pastor's kid and stuff, so people, when they come to my house and like learn that like there was that kind of aura, I would say, in our household, like that it was just kind of like it would sometimes with some of my friends it would cause some tension between us, and not in a bad way, just like an uncomfortable, because they didn't grow up in church or anything, so it was kind of different for them. And I don't think it was a bad thing necessarily. I think it's just kind of something that's just they're not used to. But I think having them in that environment is a great thing, because it's just an opportunity to share the love of Christ with them. And it might not be like a, hey, you're coming to church this weekend, but it's like just a thing of like even just a little bit of just loving on that person, and that kind of thing is just beneficial to them.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know if the word or the phrase really kind of sells what I'm thinking, but it's a little bit ironic that the gospel, which is like gospel equals good news, like that is the definition of it. The irony of something that is good news being offensive. Do you know what I mean? Like the idea of like putting it in food context, because apparently that's what we do. It's like free ice cream day, and people are like, oh, I'm so offended by the good news of free ice cream.
Yeah.
Do you find that ironic?
Yeah, it is a little like, I feel like it's a little counterintuitive to what you'd think. You'd want it to be like, the idea of it to just be like something amazing that people can like turn to and just be completely enthused about and love the idea of. But it's like oftentimes it's not the case. There's been times where I've been like on the street like sharing the gospel, and it made people angry, and like just the immediate reaction of like, get away from me kind of thing. And it was certainly like a hard experience, because it's like that's not what you want to go through whenever you're trying to, it's not the most encouraging thing to like be faced with that, but it's like I think it's just the reality of it sometimes, and like being able to like just kind of pick yourself back up and keep on going, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of it is also like we want more of what we have more of. So like what we feed ourselves is what we want. And I think a lot of the times going off of a food analogy, what's good for us may be spinach. But if we've been eating ice cream, we're not going to get super excited about a free spinach day.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like that
Popeye
kind
would.
of thing. The
Fair
spinach
enough.
is much better for us, and it is good. It is the good news, but it's not what we've grown accustomed to. That's not
Yeah.
the context that we've shaped ourselves in.
Yeah. No, this whole time, I mean, even this morning as I was listening to the message, I was thinking, so I used to work in music business and traveled with several country artists, and at the very beginning, like when I first started doing that, and you're building relationships with people, right? And they find out, oh, you believe in Jesus, like you're a Christian, and a majority of what you experience in that world is opposite. It's counter what Scripture teaches. You know, it's very of the world, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking about that, like the longer that I was with these guys and just building relationship, just being with them, like they were offended at first, you know, like, oh, you're not going to go to this party. Oh, you're not going to like drink. You're not going to, you know, whatever the list is. And what I found is over time, those were the people that then would come to my defense when other people would get offended. Does that make sense? Which is really, it's like, that's the testimony then, that's the fruit of those kinds of relationships, or that commitment to being willing to own the offense of the gospel.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's and I'll take like a small pause. You know, as we've started this podcast, we've gotten a lot of fun feedback about it, and you know, I would say overwhelmingly positive. But to like sort of pause, the whole heart behind this podcast was to illustrate a couple things. Number one, that a message on a Sunday isn't about facts, like bolstering a knowledge base. It isn't just about that. It's about letting God's word sort of penetrate your heart. And so I think this message is such a good example of like, there are some things that you have to sort of wrestle through. And so the podcast is really this idea of like watching people who are like in this every day. I mean, the two guys that are with us right now, like they're on our team. They're here a lot. They're at a school that has like a heritage of faith. Like they are in this stuff a ton, and yet there's still things we sort of wrestle with. And so I'd be curious. She kind of took two approaches or two viewpoints. The first one is, if you aren't following Jesus, the gospel is offensive, right? Like, and Ben was kind of saying why. Like in a little bit, a good example would be like, it's very clear, Scripture is very clear, like there's one way, and that's an offensive thing. I think she took the other viewpoint too of like, as someone who's following Jesus, there are things about the gospel that are hard, that if not sort of viewed through the lens of like a life of faith would be offensive. Do you guys agree with that? Did you feel like you got that from the message? I'd be curious to know, like what, like where are those friction points for you guys? Like where do you find the gospel to be sort of hard to take or offensive or sort of is sensitive for you?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I've been a believer for so long that it's hard. It's almost hard to think about being on the receiving end of that. You know, of what would it feel like to me for somebody to present the gospel as a non-believer?
Yeah.
And I think the longer you're in ministry, I think it tends to kind of muddy that water a little bit. But there are parts, like you said, of the gospel that are offensive to us even as believers. Where I think she said it on Sunday of like, oh, you want me to let go of my pride? Oh, you want me to let go of my quote unquote right to whatever that thing is?
Yeah.
Which gets in your space every day, I think, for just about anybody. And so to think about, okay, today, what are the things that I can kind of let go of that I know are my human nature, my sin nature, to then replace with the gospel, the good news, so that I'm not offended and not offending, which is, I mean, that's a challenge. That's not easy. I'm not saying, I feel like I'm saying it like it's easy to do. It is not easy to do.
I think for me, I'm a very knowledge-oriented person. So I find a lot of fulfillment in knowing what is right and sharing what is right. And I think it was a message last week or a couple weeks earlier in this series where she talks about how relationship is more important than being right. And that's a point of friction for me because so often I'm err on the side of truth rather than grace. And like, it's so hard for me sometimes to like reel it back in and to remember like the most important thing isn't that you share not like just what you know in this situation. You have to approach it differently. Yeah. And that's something that's like hard for me to shift my mindset around at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting is like, she shared the scripture of like, they will know you by your love. It's not they'll know you by your truth, which is kind of interesting. And I was even thinking about like in direct relation to what you just said, like if you look at the 10 Commandments, which we could get into that like old law, new law stuff, which I don't think is important for this moment right now. But here's what I'll say: if you look through that, it's not like love the Lord your God, honor your father and mother, evangelize the world, always be right. It was like all of these things that are way more. Obviously, love the Lord your God. That's a real one. I'm being facetious for those of you who are listening because that could be I said that like it was very serious. But what I mean is like most of those are about a heart posture of being submitted to following the Lord, not about accomplishing a task. And so I think so often I find that the offensive things with relationships come out of this idea that like my main job is to like woo you to the gospel. And I feel like scripture is really clear. And then even just my own life, I think what becomes apparent is that it's really about like loving people and having a relationship, not agreeing with everything they say, not supporting every decision, because that's not love. That's just, I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. That's
enabling.
That's enabling. That's right. That is enabling. But it is the idea of like, it's not relationship for like evangelism's sake. It's relationship because you can look at another person and see the beauty of what God has created in them. Yeah. And so I think it takes like this kind of mind shift there. I think for me, I love having you guys on. Ben and I are like old, so it's nice to have non-old people.
Ben's like, speak for yourself.
I feel old.
And then like we're all turning like this, like our necks are stiff because we're old. No, but I think here's what's interesting. I made a choice to follow Jesus, just like you guys did, and I accepted the reality that there are things that are hard about that. Are a good example. So our previous house, we like moved in, and the people brought over like beer and wine, and they had clearly been drinking for a long time. And we had been there like 3 days, and they were trying to be neighborly, which was super nice because we were very young. Allie, I think, was like 7 months pregnant, and they're like, "Hey, you guys want to hang out?" And they brought all this alcohol, and we don't drink. That's probably another episode, but he's like, "What do you guys do?" And it's that same thing, like heading on the plane. We were like, "Oh man." Like, I remember he wasn't wearing a shirt. It was like a whole thing, right? And I'm like, well, I think I tried to like be slow with it. So I was like, I'm in music. He's like, cool. Where do you guys play? And I'm like, all right. It's like we play a lot of different places. Like, we play, conferences and at church every week. And he was like, church? He's like, you don't work there, do you? And I'm like, okay. Yeah, we do. And you could just see, like, they had a really bad experience with church. There's a lot of hurt. They were offended by, like, oh man. And it really took we were there for 6 years. It took 4 years to sort of build that relationship. And just constantly reminded, like, through that there's just this sort of reality that I made a decision to do this, and it will be offensive to some people. I think where I struggle and where the gospel sort of starts to get in my space is I really want my kids to know Jesus. Like, I believe wholeheartedly that, and I've experienced this, that like life to its fullest is found in walking with Jesus. I think I also realize that means I'm encouraging them to step into a life that will offend people and is going to be hard. And so I think I struggle with that at times, where it's like, I want my kids to experience life to its fullest, but I also don't want to sign them up for pain.
Yeah.
Yet it's like inevitable. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a question, because I was just thinking about this.
Yes.
As you were talking.
When you're making a hot dog. No, I'm kidding.
It has to be all beef.
Yeah, all beef.
That's right.
Bun or no bun?
I'm sorry?
Bun or no bun? When you have a hot dog, do you have a bun with it?
He's not
Yeah.
crazy.
Yes, I do have a bun with
right.
the hot
It's
dog.
got to be an all beef.
What about bratwursts?
That's
all
right.
beef?
Yes, I do have
Sauce?
Yes.
No sauce.
sauce. We're calling it sauce.
Fixins?
Well, what?
Relish, yes.
Okay.
Ketchup. That's it.
All right.
I don't like mustard. I'm sorry. If
You butter
anybody's-
the bun?
If anybody's offended by that.
Have you guys?
I need to leave.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say this: if you have not buttered a hot dog bun and then done that, it's crazy. I saw it on the YouTubes.
I don't know if I'm not sure if I have done that or not.
You are gonna want to do that.
I mean, I know I personally have not, but I may have at some point had a hot dog that the bun has been
Well,
buttered.
think about this: when we've had lobster rolls, they butter that.
That
thing.
is true. If you
Anyway.
haven't had
Sorry. What was your
Off
question?
topic.
I'm sorry.
how much of the offense that we experience from other people in terms of the gospel is because we assume in those moments that they are going to be offended? Does that make sense?
Say that again.
How much of the offense from other people that we experience because of the gospel is because we assume that in having those conversations, people are going to be offended? Like, going into it. What if going into those conversations, it's just what it is?
So you're saying, like, what if we approached it from a different mindset
Yeah.
of, like, there's a possibility they won't be offended.
Right.
And, like, going into that with the mindset of that rather than
Yeah.
this person is going to be offended.
Yeah,
And then,
because
like,
I think, to like Stephen's example, in those conversations, we're playing in our head, oh man, they're going to ask what I do. I'm going to say I'm a pastor, or I work at a church, or I'm on the worship team, or, whatever the answer is, which is then here's going to be the result of that conversation.
So it's like self-fulfilling
We're
prophecy.
playing it out in our head before we even get to that point.
Yeah.
So how much of that, what happens if we just go, I'm a pastor, and you don't say it with any kind of like,
Negative connotation or like
is
uneasiness.
that good? Are we good on that one?
Yeah.
Kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely think for me personally, and I'd love to hear from you guys, I definitely think that my experience has been people don't respond authentically. Or I've seen it play out enough that I feel like I know. But I mean, to your point, I think that that's on me. And maybe I'm creating, going back to like the series, the idea was like zooming out to be able to be like, oh man, I'm offensive and offended. But am I also reading into like someone should be offended? Or will be? Like, I feel like that is sort of the burden maybe is on me.
Because I think we all do it.
Yeah.
Like I do it. I mean, I had somebody last week asked me, and I paused long enough for I think where I think it was weird, maybe, but then I said it, and they were like, "Oh," I was like, "You're not." Okay, this is going well.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked the question, because I was just thinking, replaying some things for myself of like, man, I think I assume more often than I should, that people are just going to be like, oh, I got to go. See you later.
Yeah.
And they're out,
And this may sound stupid, but like, I genuinely in that moment, like didn't want to alienate a neighbor, like just like any other human, or I would say most humans. Guess you can't say all anymore. You can't say all about anything. But anyway, I would like to have genuine like relationships with my neighbor. Again, not for the idea of like, hey, I'm trying to win you over to the most right thing. I believe that like following Jesus is the best, and this is the way. But I genuinely want to have a relationship with my neighbors, and I think I do carry in like, oh, I've seen this before, and I don't want to alienate them on day one, and end up like because, spoiler alert, just because you work at a church doesn't mean you have all the answers and everything's perfect.
I think there's a delicate balance, and a voice that's been really prominent in my faith life over the last year or so has been Jonathan Pokluda, JP. And there's a thing that he says on his podcast, Becoming Something. That's not a... But that's, you can't determine your obedience by the outcome.
Yeah. That's good.
And it's really good, and it makes me think of the parable of the sower, where the sower scatters seed, and it talks about the different kinds of soils. But that's called the parable of the sower, and not the parable of the various types of
soil in which this could be planted.
That sort of thing. So, like, there are multiple interpretations.
Yeah.
But I like thinking about that in terms of it is our job to sow the seed.
Yeah.
And it is not our responsibility. We have no control over how the soil is going to respond. But that doesn't take away our responsibility to sow the seed.
Yeah.
100%.
That's good.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know, she kind of, again, there's sort of like these two vantage points through the whole message. But the idea of like, if you're following Jesus or not, there is a moment where when you talk about the gospel, it comes to your pride. Like she kind of spoke about it in two different ways, but I'd be curious, do you feel like the gospel sort of gets in your space around pride?
Sorry, I'm giving space for others to speak.
I'm trying to let it like brew in my mind a little bit. Yeah, I got to let it marinate a little bit. So you're saying, do you think our pride gets in the way of our interpretation of the gospel, or?
I think that if you ask me or the people around me, like, is Stephen a prideful person? Prideful person. A lot of P's in that. Like, sorry. Anyway, I think most people would say no. Yeah. And I would say no. Like, I don't think I'm prideful, but there is a reality of the gospel says you can't do it. And I like, you can't do it on your own. Like, and specifically, just for context, because you can't see my face. Well, actually, you could. You can see my face, unless you're not watching it, in which case you wouldn't see my face. So if you're running right now, you're doing a great job. Keep running. No, the gospel says that like a life connected to God after you die is only possible through Jesus. Like, I'm trying to simplify that in like the most concise way, which means I can't make a way to do that by myself. And so there's something that you have to accept of like laying it down, which is ultimately becomes a pride issue. Can you put your trust in this thing and deny that, you know, you can't do it? And I think for me, like my sort of MO is like I solve problems. I'm kind of like the last line of defense in a lot of things. And so that becomes a conflict. I think ultimately I tend to try to solve things on my own. And so I think that is the thing about the gospel is it's a constant submission or denying of yourself. I mean, pick up your cross every day. I mean, that, so I'm just curious, do you guys feel that? I think this series kind of gave me another way to look at that idea of what it means to deny yourself every day. And I was just curious if I just took that away or if you guys maybe felt similarly, or if it impacts your pride in a different way.
For sure.
There's certainly times where I like check myself and I'm like, I have to like reel it in every once in a while. Like it'll be at like, just for example, work or something. And it's like, I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that this goes as well as I think it should. And then I'm just like, what's the goal here? It's like, this is not a, like, I need to like reel it in and understand that we're not here to make like the best show or the best entertainment. It's like literally, it's about experiencing God, not about, oh my gosh, this microphone didn't get turned on at this right time. And it's like, sometimes you just have to, I have to check myself and understand that like, it's okay to not be perfect all the time and understand that it's just making sure that I have a good mindset and I'm not doing things for the wrong reason kind of thing. And so it's always good to get that refresher and like have those checks, in my opinion. I like having those every once in a while to just kind of internally think like, okay, let's mindset shift. There's a little blending of words there on accident.
Mind shaft.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing I grapple with sometimes, and it's just like an ongoing battle that you just always have to kind of keep on checking yourself. At least for me.
Yeah. I know every day that's pride is something that I have to like really, really grapple with. And I think it's kind of a pendulum of like, I'm either feeling really good and like I can take on the world
100%.
or it's like I can't do anything.
Yeah.
And so and then there are certain times whenever I'm over here of like, yeah, I can take on the world.
Yeah.
And I can like go through the discipline of reminding myself that I'm not enough and that I can't do it all. But like the subtext is like, but I really could do a lot of it,
Yeah,
right?
that's it. Yeah.
So it's like, I know that humility is like accurate knowledge of yourself and your position in relation to God.
Yeah.
But do you guys have any like practical, helpful ways to like steady that pendulum right where it needs to be?
Because you don't want to have
guys?
moments where you're like just unnecessarily hard on yourself and like just hating on yourself, but you also don't want to be to the point of like pride. That's something I deal with as well.
Well, I think you nailed it. Pride isn't just, it's like the idea of obsession with oneself above all other things, right? So it's like, you're right. It is this sort of pendulum where you can be prideful and be really self-deprecating because that's what you're focused on, which is I mean, I don't know that we think about that. I think ultra humility or the ultra denial of oneself is like some sick version of pride. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think you nailed that. As far as like practices, I think, and I don't know the pendulum thing, I use that analogy a lot. I think the older that I've gotten, I'll be curious to hear what Ben says. It's as you get older. No. I mean,
Sorry.
Calling him old
I just
again.
looked at them and they were like, because he's older.
yeah, no, because we're both older.
Yeah.
But like, I think the pendulum thing, it's as you get older, it starts to swing less extreme. But I think you're kind of always dialing it in. I think that was, Heather talked about, and I'm going to summarize this at the end of her message. She's like, regardless of if you've been in this room 10,000 times, you're in this constant state of like being spiritually formed. And so I think for me, there's a recognition of like I'm not perfectly in the center of completely self-deprecating and super prideful. I think that pendulum sort of is still swinging, and the older I get, the more I walk with Jesus, the less extremes. You know what I'm saying? I think that happens in a couple ways. I think one is obviously being in constant or consistent is maybe a better word, in a consistent walk with the Lord. And I think that happens a lot of different ways. I think that's praying. I think that's scripture reading. I think that's devos. I think that's conversation. I think that's one big thing. I think the second thing is having people in your life who have proper perspective of you. Because they can help when you don't know. They can inform it, but they also will give you feedback in a way that's accurate. So I think when you have people in your life, like for you guys, what could be really cool, and even like Chad may be this person for you guys, somebody who sees you frequently, but isn't like fanboying you, that is giving you feedback. Ben and I sort of have that relationship where it becomes accurate feedback about where we are. I think those two things matter. I'd say the third thing is, at least for me, I've had to develop this skill of like trying to be objective in situations where it's sort of like I use the word zoom out all the time. So there's probably a lot of people who are like, don't say zoom out again. So I'm going to say zoom out again. But when you zoom out from your life and can look at it and go, what is actually real? And there's times where I can do that. I would say probably more often than not, I need somebody like a Ben, or a mentor, my wife or whatever, to help remind me of what is real. So yeah, I think those are like, I know that's probably the cliche answer, like read your Bible, have friends. But I think the reality is like have people in your corner that are going to tell you the truth, even when it's hard. Which is like, are you going to be offended if they say, hey man, like, what's going on right now? Like, if you get feedback, are you instantly offended? And I mean,
So it's like an accountability thing.
yeah, it's not just somebody who's like going, oh man, how many bad non-Jesus words did you say? None? Cool. Check that box off. It's somebody who can go, hey, so over this last semester, like I feel like you've grown a lot. And I've seen that in depth of your relationship. However, like the way that you talk about yourself when we meet or when we talk and it's constantly negative, like is painting this picture that is not accurate to who you are. I think that really matters. I know for me, I'm way more self-deprecating than the other way. I think it's equally true for you to be like, hey man, I've been walking with you and like you treat people like they're not as good as you. Like, do you have somebody in your life who would tell you the truth like that? I think if you don't, that's a dangerous place to be, and that pendulum is going to be like wild because you're constantly trying to figure out what's real. Sorry, that was super long-winded.
That's good.
Ben, do you have something as the eldest member of this group?
Man, bringing it back to the
man.
old comment again.
I know. Now I feel
I'm
really old.
No, I'm the shortest person in this group.
Well, would you rather be old or short? Sorry, that has nothing to do with this.
Is it a Benjamin Button situation where I'm like old?
No, this doesn't
my
work
life?
in reverse. This is, you get either or.
So I could either be short my whole life or be old my whole life?
Well, you're already short your whole life.
No, I'm just saying. You said, would you rather be old or short? And I'm trying to just...
In this very moment.
Yeah. I think I'd be fine with being short, I think.
Yeah.
But I've never been
Sorry.
tall,
I'm
so...
sorry if that was.
I have
was
a
maybe
lot of-
a little too cutting.
That was.
I've always been short. So I'm not offended by that.
Okay.
I am.
Yeah, you are.
Fair.
I feel like I have a lot of thoughts in my head. I'll see if I can bring it down a little bit. So there is no such thing as like not being formed. You like, doesn't matter if it's by scripture or music or friends, the world, whatever it is, like you are being formed by something.
Actively.
Actively.
Yeah.
Everybody is currently in formation somehow. And so I think there is like part of our responsibility. John Mark Comer says this a lot, of like honor the process of becoming, recognizing that it is not a destination necessarily. Like it is the journey for everybody. All of us are on the same journey of becoming somebody or something, right? And so I think part of navigating that pendulum swing is starting to have your own self-recognition of those moments when it starts to swing and being able to go, oh, I'm noticing this trend. I'm going this way. I need to recalibrate. And that recalibration then, like, where do we go for that moment? Right? Because that's the thing that will start to dictate our ability to slow the pendulum or I hate to say stop it, because I don't know that there's ever a moment in life where it's like, got it. Yeah. We're there. We've got it all figured out.
Probably death.
Probably that's accurate. Death would be that moment. Yeah. Which would probably we were talking about being old. I'd rather not talk about.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So I just think being able to recognize that and as believers, I do believe that recalibration is the silence and solitude. Like it's the moments that we go back to, like Jesus being in the garden and go, I need to get back with the Father and recalibrate what's happening right now and remind myself of ultimately who's in control of what's happening in this situation, whatever that is. I've been reading this book by Andrew Arndt. It's called Streams on the Wasteland, and he's taken all these sayings from the desert fathers and mothers, which are just brilliant, but putting it in like modern context. And the two things that he's drawn out of it are that the things that kind of form or impact us the most are community with people. There's relationships, going back to the accountability piece, and it's the silence and solitude. And if we get too lopsided in one of those, then our formation is lopsided and off, and it can lead to, I think, the pride on one side of that pendulum swing. And so I think that part of life is just a constant navigation of those two sides, those practices of how do we engage in community and relationship really well with other people, while always going back to the vine. Like how do we do that? And I think you can do it all together. But I guess that's what I think of when we have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I for whatever reason, it sparked this question, and maybe I want to believe that this is a question that I just came up with, but we may have already talked about this.
Okay.
Or Heather, if Heather's listening, she's going to be like, you stole that. I'm not saying that this is originally mine. I'm saying there's a really good chance that this is mine.
It's yours, own it.
All right, great.
If it's mine,
But
it's
here's
gonna
my
be a
question.
pride moment.
What do you guys think? Maybe the question in all of this, especially for a series on offense, is what is the offense that you're taking? Like if you're offended, say about you. And what I mean is, like, I was trying to think of something that's really offended me recently. I did a session a few weeks ago, and one of the players came in like really, really arrogant, and I was so frustrated by that because I was like, you can just feel like, one, there's no reason to be this confident right now because you're totally gonna bomb this. And number two, I just felt like the frustration of like what? Don't do that. But I think what looking back, first of all, he did bomb it. It was horrible. Which is the thing. But what's really the question that I have is like, what is that offense? Me being offended by his like confidence actually revealing in me. Because that's like another litmus test in all of this stuff is like, where's the pendulum? Like, well, I think the reality is I wish I could carry that level of confidence. I tend to carry the, like, I told Heather, I'm like a cross between a surfer and an auto mechanic because I'm always like, she'll say
Quite
something.
the variety scale there. Where do you meet in the middle?
Well, basically the way that plays out is she says something to me and I go, whoa. And
yeah,
that's it.
man. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, but my point being, like, I wish I could carry that. And so I think what Ben just said about the reality of like you're always being formed is like, what questions can you ask to help identify where you are? Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that's probably the guiding question. Okay. So to kind of wrap this up, I actually think that's maybe like a huge takeaway. If we're talking about zooming out from our lives, it's the idea of like everything that's happening, wherever you are listening to this right now, wherever you will be later today, where you were yesterday, is forming you. I mean, Heather talked about that. We're always being spiritually formed, but I think you kind of drove that point home of like, even when you're not like sitting in a service or studying, but like you're being formed in conversation and the way that you're interpreting a situation. And so I think that's even a good what's the right word? That's a good thing to just understand and know and be able to look at a situation and be like, oh, this is forming something about me or in me.
Yeah. The Holy Spirit is just actively in us, working always.
And being aware of that can allow you to sort of maybe more accurately see the situation. You guys, do you have any closing thoughts on this? I know we've kind of like gone on a little bit of a journey here. I have a tendency to talk over people. So did you guys have any closing thoughts?
I guess just like the idea that you're not going to stop that pendulum.
Yeah.
That's about it being about the journey means that like you're not going to arrive. You're not going to reach that point where you can just coast.
Yeah.
And where you don't have to worry about it anymore. Yeah. And that's not to say like you should be worrying about it all the time.
Yeah.
But like I think that's something that has been a big mindset shift. Mind shaft for me has been the shift of like, there's not going to be a moment when I figure it all out, and then everything's good. It is a constant formation, and you're going to have to continue.
I think that's just
realigning and
the nature of humanity and us being people that sin. It's just we have to allow ourselves grace in that and understand that we are human and that it's okay, and that's why we have God's saving grace. Is that because there will be times when we do swing one side or the other. Yeah. And I think rather than, I mean, it's okay to be unhappy with that, but I feel like we also need to, I think moving past and how you respond to that is like the thing that's important. It's not like, I think it's, it's just realizing that like I have made a mistake and acknowledging it and making it right with God and then continuing on rather than stewing on it and letting it fester and kind of, because that can lead to lots of problems.
Well, and, I'll give one more analogy, and then Ben's looking at me with a very concerned look.
Don't do it.
I'm going to. If you think about, journey with me for 1 second. Think about a baby that's been alive. Just hold on. Here, think about a baby.
Okay.
That's been alive for 4 days. The length of a day, that 5th day, feels like an eternity because it's 20% of their experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
So like so if you sort of run that out, like a day to us is like a much shorter percentage of our experience, like for Ben and I, because we've been alive longer than you guys have. but you know, are you with me? Are you with me?
Yes,
I'm with
Right,
you.
right.
I'm tracking.
And so I think the reality of like a hard day feels less weighted than it did when I was 20, because I understand that like one hard day is a smaller percentage of the scope of my life. Does that make sense? Are you
Yeah.
with me?
Mm-hmm.
I think in a similar way, what Ben's talking about when you're being formed is like when you first come to the realization of like, man, I do things that are not in my best interest and that don't honor the Lord, aka sin. I'm trying to like summarize that in a more tangible way. Things that are not like things that aren't pushing us towards the Lord. We make those decisions. At first, that's a really heavy weight because like your experience is like, oh man, now I'm just a bad person doing this thing. As you walk with the Lord more, these things become not less intense, but you start to realize that in the scope of your spiritual life, this is a thing that's forming you, and it's a percentage of that forming is a lot smaller than like it originally was. And so I think what's interesting is that I think we tend to look at sort of age and experience in a negative light when the reality is like there's this beauty to being formed and this depth. And so I think as we're talking about this and really this has been a conversation about being spiritually formed via the on-ramp of offense. It really is about like, are you allowing yourself to be formed? Are you looking at the end goal of your life? Not that like the best years were in your 20s or when you're in high school, but the reality of who you are now and who you've been formed to be is like this beautiful thing. And so I guess I would just challenge people, like, you get to lean in or lean out of a situation. Mm-hmm. Like, we're all going to hit hard days, roadblocks, whatever. Mm-hmm. And you have a choice of like what you do with that. You can internalize that in a way that is negatively forming you, or you can approach it as like, as something that's going to positively shape you, even if it's a hard thing. And I think Asher said something beautiful there of like, when something happens that you know has like not honored the Lord, that has created maybe a hardship or whatever it is, aka sin, the first thing you do is take it to the Lord and move on and let that experience shape it in a positive way versus dwelling on the fact and sort of internalizing it as a bad person. That's a whole random thing. Just thinking about the percentage of like how we're formed, the percentage of our days, the way that that's weighted changes as we get older and more mature. And anyway, basically that was like, dude, did I just multiverse this thing? Did I just take us to like this is a parallel universe where we're old?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Asher.
What are you sorry?
Asher's trying to be supportive. He's after we're done with this, I'm gonna get some feedback. That'll be like, don't bring the multiverse in. All right,
Marvel's gonna sue us.
yeah. Yeah.
They've got that copyright.
Multiverse TM. Okay, last 30 seconds. We're not sponsored by The Exchange. It's a coffee shop in our community, but I would argue it's I think the best.
Yeah.
So you're going to The Exchange and you're ordering a drink. What are you getting? Go.
Dude, their cortados, so good.
Will you explain that for people who don't know what a cortado is?
Cortado is 1 part espresso, 1 part steamed milk. It's like 6 ounces of coffee, which I don't think is enough. I want 2 of those. But then you're drinking a quad shot of espresso, basically, and that's also not good. So,
Yep. And then you're doing karate in the garage, right?
yeah.
All right, Than, what are you getting?
Probably a dirty chai.
Would explain that for the kind people at home.
Yes, that is a chai with a
That's
shot of
got some
espresso.
dirt in it.
Dirty
Oh.
water.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep, Ben. Keep in mind it's fall.
If you guys are like
Yeah, I mean-
black coffee,
Yeah, probably either like a drip or a vanilla latte. However, I have not tried this because I don't know if they offer it. But I'm going to ask them next time I'm there. A Cuban Americano.
Yeah.
Or a Cubanicano.
is that with
Which-
Cuban shots?
Yes. So you pull sugar or pull the shot through sugar,
Yeah,
and it is
amazing.
I love making those. I have like a little home
So
barista
good.
machine. Like I have
Yeah.
my own espresso machine.
Yeah.
Love doing those.
yeah. That would be
Very good.
that'd probably be my go-to if it was a thing.
yeah. I've heard they make the machine dirty, so people don't like to do that.
Yeah, I think that's an excuse, but
It's probably an
It's
excuse.
probably just it's
But
more work.
Cubano. That would be the stuff. I like non-sweet drinks most of the time, so
Mm.
pour over maybe. That's such a jerky. That's
No,
such a snobby thing to say.
It's not because
It is.
I one time was at a coffee shop. Well, it was like a very small coffee shop, and it was like I saw this guy like making I had like had a latte the day before, and I was like, and I saw him like precisely measuring out his beans to get the exact ratio, and then I was like, could I buy a cup of your like pour over? And like this is like his personal pour over, and like
Yeah.
and he was like, okay, I'll make you one. This is the best cup of coffee I think I've ever had in my life. Like
Wow.
it took him probably 20 minutes to make it.
Challenge accepted.
yep.
Challenge accepted. We will teach you the way.
I would love that.
All right, that's all I got. We love you guys. We'd love to see you on a Sunday morning, 10 a.m. If you haven't checked out the messages, like I said, you can go back and see all of them. They're on YouTube. Check out previous versions of the podcast. Asher, Than, I'd love to have you back. And we could talk about something less heavy than offense and being spiritually formed till you're old. But we love you guys. See ya.
Thank you for joining us. For more information, visit madisonpark.church.